If you're someone looking to take your product videos to the next level, then stick around, because this video is for you. Unless you're already at this level and are already doing the things I'm about to show you, in which case, bugger. Now, your starting point for doing product videos is probably one continuous video of you holding a product in your hands and occasionally holding it up to the camera to highlight a particular detail. Now, this works, it gets the job done. However, sometimes it can feel a little dragged out, maybe a bit disengaging in places. The first step to level up would be to cut out some of these lulls and the long pauses to try and keep things flowing a bit more. Now, don't go crazy. Do leave some time for people to process what you've just said, rather than jumping straight from one sentence to the next and back again without so much as even taking a breath, because that can be far too overwhelming at times when you're cutting straight into the next section before they've had time to process fully what you've just said in the last. The next step from here would be to inject some B-roll footage. Now, when I say B-roll, I don't necessarily mean a relentless bombardment of super slow-mo video that is completely unrelated to anything, with spinny cuts from one clip to the next that just make you want to throw up through your eyeballs. By B-roll, we simply mean additional footage that cuts away from your main A-roll of you talking. Usually some closer shots of the products, perhaps some cuts of you using the product and such. And B-roll footage serves some very important purposes. First of all, it allows you to draw absolute attention to whatever you are talking about. So rather than having to hold the product up to the camera and try and show it off this way, you can create some more prepared shots with much more suitable lighting and perhaps even a closer focusing lens to be able to capture that section in a lot more detail. The next thing is it switches things up a bit, gives your viewers something new to look at and to help keep them engaged. And the last thing it does very well is distract the viewer from all the cuts that you've got in your video. Now, trust me, I have learnt the hard way that videos can look rather disjointed if you're making cuts every few seconds, especially if there is a noticeable change in your position from one shot to the next. But you can mask all of that simply by throwing a different video clip into view. So, that is the basics. Let's look at how you can make your product footage more engaging. The key really is get some movement. Either the product moving, the camera moving, or both. Having everything completely static can last probably a few seconds before people's minds start to drift. By keeping at least some subtle movement, it just helps keep the focus on the product that little bit longer. Now, I find filming products outdoors can be very useful at times. Somewhere scenic, like a local park, for example, can inject a bit of colour, or even out in the streets can bring some interesting textures. But what if you can't go out anywhere or don't want to go out anywhere? What if you want to stay indoors? Now, this can still work by, just having the product on a table, for example, and you moving the camera around the product. However, let me show you a few tricks that I use in a lot of my reviews just to add something a little bit different, using a turntable, aka a Lazy Susan, and a motorized slider. Now, turntables are simply a surface which rotates quite slowly and allows for a full 360-degree view of a product. They can be found fairly cheap. For example, the one I use I bought a few years ago for about 20 quid. It's got a plug socket and an on-off switch. That's it. And it goes at one single fixed speed that is not particularly fast. However, I do believe there are some slightly more expensive ones these days with a switch where you can have various speeds to choose from. Now, you could just use the turntable by itself, either keep the camera static on the tripod and record the product turning around, or handhold the camera and move it around as the product's turning. Now, having that on the tripod allows you the option of doing speed ramps to be able to move from one side of the product quickly round to the other, or just generally give your video a bit more of a quicker feel. The other thing that a static camera allows is that you could record one product as it's rotating, then swap it for another product in exactly the same place, and record that rotating, and then fade between the two clips in post. Then we bring the slider into the mix. Now, you can get motorized or non-motorized. No motor is usually cheaper, but means you've got to move the slider yourself, which will give you smoother movement than trying to hand hold it, but it's ridiculously difficult to maintain a steady speed all the way down the rail. Which is kind of important for these next tips, which is to combine the slider and the turntable together. This will give you two platforms to move both the camera and the product in constant steady movements. So here are a few types of product shots that I often have done with a slider and a turntable. Firstly, if you're focusing on a particular aspect of a product, such as some particular text or a specific feature, then rather than just a close-up shot, I have the product on the turntable and I bring the camera across the face of it, timing it right so that the area of the product that I want to draw attention to comes to face the front just as the camera is passing in front of it. And then it will obviously then turn away into the distance. Now you can also do this handheld, but then you're somewhat limited by having to move the camera at roughly the same speed as the turntable. Another way would be a dolly shot with the camera moving either straight towards or away on the slider, but with the added component that the product is turning on the turntable at the same time. And this gives you some creative scope because you can either have the slider moving quickly and then that just leaves the product turning at the normal slow speed, or you can have the slider moving at a crawl so the product completes several rotations and then ramp the speed up in post. Or lastly, you can try similar but going vertically. The slider rail stands upright in front of the product, so as the camera is moving vertically and the product is rotating, you get more of a general overview of the product whilst adding another dimension to the shot. So, there are a few ideas for you on how to improve your product videos, and if all else fails, get a dog and distract people that way instead. So if you found this video helpful and you haven't already done so, then please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.